In stark contrast to 2024, that 2021 season weren't half bad, was it? It wasn't half bad. And listen, I'll flip back and forth, I'll jump into different races and just refresh my memory. But I was compelled to go back and, as near as makes no difference, watch the full season. Because it got techie. There is a Sky documentary called Duel. Max Verstappen versus Sir Lewis Hamilton. And it's incredible. I've watched it a gazillion times already, but I had to go back and watch it again. It popped up very conveniently over the past bank holiday weekend. By the way, happy Easter for each and every single one of you that celebrate it. It's a period, isn't it, that spend time with the family, have a couple of cheeky Easter eggs. But I chose, in my infinite wisdom, to go back and watch Duel, the documentary that chronicles the 2021 season, and I was dumbfounded. Matthew Brown, you're far too kind, and I will get to that, sir, I promise. I was dumbfounded. I'd forgotten how blockbuster, how chaotic, how suspenseful that the 2021 season was. And for different reasons than I remembered it. One of those where you watch something back and you remember it different to how your memory presented it to you. It was different. It was different. And I'm going to explain to you how, and the gift that was the 2021 season, because I think there are many things that even 3 years later are still worth mentioning. I still feel like nothing was ever the same, right? Shout out to Drake, whose album of the same name was very, very good. But I feel like between now and then, everything's changed. Max Verstappen is on the rise. He's becoming great, if not already a GOAT. Lewis Hamilton potentially having crescendoed at the latter stages of his career. Feels like they're ships passing each other in the night as far as their respective peaks, right? One 26, 27 years old, the other 39. And I feel like in 2021, they met each other both doing one of these, right? They were both in the ascendancy still. Hence why 2021 was so chaotic. You had dudes in similar but different machinery, equal-ish, two of the best racers that you've ever seen or will ever see in F1 going head-to-head for 22 races, and it gave rise to some of the most incredible scenes that you will ever see in F1. Still my favourite season in all of F1 history, and I don't know when we're going to see a season that betters that for racing, for consistency, for plot line, story arc, generational talents going head-to-head. It was bonkers. But there are a couple of different things that I want to talk to. Let's talk earlier on, of course, in the season. It looked like Mercedes, lest we forget, struggled during testing. They didn't even have a car. Everybody thought Red Bull were going to run away with it. Ultimately, Mercedes did what they can't do in 2024, and they pulled the cat out the bag, didn't they? They rocked up to the first Grand Prix in Bahrain, and all of a sudden they had a car capable of challenging, if not dominating, as they had done for the previous 6 seasons. It looked like they were going to continue it, didn't they? It looked like their line of travel was constant all of a sudden, which was rogue, because everybody was like, well, they must have been sandbagging in testing though. Where have they come from? It doesn't make sense. But of course, Bahrain happened and Lewis was very, very, very good. But I'm not going to go even in chronological order, because I'm just going to talk to the peaks, the bits that stand out in the memory even. So look, Sochi, a brilliant race, right? And they spent a lot of time in the Duel. If you've got Sky Sports, go and check it out. If you haven't, go and find somebody with Sky Sports so you can go and watch this documentary. It's a glorious two-parter, and F1 fans around the world will be treating themselves to what I still can't believe how well they chronicled that season and all the nuance, the rich tapestry that ensued that year. Sochi, let's talk about that very quickly. This is Lando Norris's race, right? And again, remember, I'm trying to draw parallels, dotted line between 2021 and 2024, because Lando Norris is still living in the shadow of what could have been his first victory, yet to obtain that first victory. Sochi should have been that, had he listened, of course, to his pit crew who told him that more rain was coming. What about those inters, Lando? To which Lando Norris responded, no, shut up. How did that work out, Lando? Listen to your pit crew, for they have access to analysis and information that you cannot from within the cockpit, Lando. And of course, more rain comes. Lewis also questioned, but he has that trust with the likes of Shove, Allison, Bowles, Toto. They told him to come in. Lewis didn't want to, but eventually they called carte blanche. Lewis came into the pits and ultimately won the race. Lando is still living in the shadow of Sochi 2021. That should have been his first race victory. 2021 Monza 2, lest we forget, similar story. Danny Rick ultimately won that race. That was Lando's to lose. He had the pace, but obviously team orders were in effect and he was told to hold station. McLaren finished 1 and 2. Both of those two are worthy of note. Monza not least because of what happened between the two title protagonists. Unbelievable settings. Remember the time when Max Verstappen parked his car on Lewis Hamilton's head, but for a cheeky halo that could have been life-threatening / serious injury to Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, the way that happened, and again, this is why sometimes the racing gods are just cruel and wicked concurrently, brilliant at the same time. So those guys are going for it, right? But Max Verstappen has a problem. I feel like he flops the start. Something happened. It should have been Monza should have been Max Verstappen's to lose, but I think he flopped qualifying. He didn't get the best start, and then obviously he's gone into the pits and he's had a dodgy pit stop, uncharacteristically poor from Red Bull. Lewis then goes in the pits and he loses an additional 4 seconds. As Lewis is exiting the pits, what happens? Turn 1. Max and Lewis are both fighting for the same piece of track. You cannot write this ish. You cannot write it. Turn 1 and turn 2 at Monza. You can't go too deep. It's too narrow. It's too narrow. The corners, the angle of the corners, too acute. They have those bloody sausage curbs, and Max Verstappen being Max Verstappen, he's not having that. And again, we get that incident, and again, we get the pictorial. It's mad. The picture that will live long in the memory of the two, very similar to bloody Senna and Prost, right? In 89, similar sort of thing. The way their cars are like clumsily entangled upon one another, you know? Max Verstappen's atop Lewis Hamilton. You get the picture again, another image that will live long in the memory of Max Verstappen walking past the beached car of Lewis Hamilton as he desperately tries to reverse it out the gravel, not dissimilar to what he did in Imola. Again, another race. All of these races were bangers. All of these races served to augment to the plot line that was the 2021 championship. Imola in particular, though, was very, very deep because you guys remember Imola was where Lewis had an unforced error, another uncharacteristic unforced error. What did Lewis do? He was trying to overtake. I want to say it was Ocon up the inside. And again, it's wet, wasn't it? Changeable conditions. And he's outbraked himself, ended up in the barrier. His race was over. As near as makes no difference. Got very lucky though with a cheeky safety car, didn't it? Or they red flagged it. What am I talking about? Red flagged it, meaning they could work on his car and sort out his tyres. So he damaged his front wing materially. Lewis wasn't going to be able to get that back. And so the red flag was exactly what the doctor ordered. Got very, very lucky. And by the way, who caused that red flag? None other than King George Russell of King's Lynn, Norfolk. Oh, the humanity. Let me talk to this as well. And we get to the crux of this situation. I'm not even going to go into Abu Dhabi, the finish. You guys all know what happened with the fight finale. As controversial and steeped in plot twist that was. For me, there were 2 highlights to 2021. As I watch it back, there are 2 things that stuck out to me that I'm like, okay, I'm not quite understanding what's going on here still 3 years later. Here are those 2 things. Silverstone. and not for what you think. Bear with me. Silverstone 2021, yeah. I've always rated Lewis Hamilton very highly. I've always thought that Lewis Hamilton is probably the most complete racing driver that I'll ever see in my lifetime. I've always thought him probably the quickest, maybe not over 1 lap, but A to B over the course of a race distance. I've always thought Lewis had something in him that it would take another driver that was different, right? Different to anything I'd ever seen, to compete with Lewis on any sort of frequency, with any sort of consistency over the course of a 22-24 race season. I'll see you that though, Cameron, and I will raise you this. Around Silverstone, that's something different altogether. Lewis's home track, of course. Lewis will have got his 10,000 hours in there, and he's always been brilliant. The flowy nature of the turns, Beckett's, Maggots, Luffield, like all of them together as a package, as far as a racetrack, makes it really, really difficult to beat Lewis Hamilton around. And we've seen that on a gazillion occasions, right? The famous time on three wheels when he still managed to win that race. The first qualifying session of his at Silverstone of his career in 2007 when he smashed it on pole. GP2, Pizzioni and PK overtaking him 3 wide. There have been a gazillion case in points as far as Lewis Hamilton's strengths around Silverstone. Something about the characteristics of that track just suits him, make him really difficult to beat as a racing driver. And then we get to 2021. So I've long thought, listen, Max Verstappen was always one that had a lot of potential right from 2016 Barcelona. And they spend a lot of time talking about 2016 Barcelona on this documentary, by the way. God tier drive. See Niki Lauda approaching Jos Verstappen, taking off his hat, shaking his hand. He's the talent of a century. Like, to do that is just something remarkable. Changeable conditions, overtaking Nico Rosberg. Danny Rick round the outside of turn 3 at Brazil. Just a different level of drive, right? So to say Max Verstappen didn't have potential would be a lie. But the extent of that potential, I'm not sure anybody truly knew until 2021. And I say all that to say this. The litmus test for me of Max Verstappen's potential was always going to be at a track like Silverstone. Yeah, you might be able to beat Lewis Hamilton at, I don't know, Australia or Spa or Zandvoort even, but to beat that dude in equal-ish machinery, to outdrive him at Silverstone is something different altogether. So let me see how Max Verstappen's going to get on. I think I even placed a cheeky bet on Lewis Hamilton to win that race weekend. I'll be honest with you, both sprint and the race. Because you just don't beat, that's the rules of F1, right? In equal-ish machine, you're going to need a much faster car. In equal-ish machinery, one just doesn't beat a Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone. That's the equation. That's the maths and the way it works, right? So we get to the sprint weekend again. Remember, it was a sprint race weekend at Silverstone in 2021. So then we get to that weekend, and what happens, guys? I'm not talking about the race, I'm talking about the sprint. Max Verstappen outraces one Sir Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone. I'm like, oh my God, this is different now. I fully expected Lewis Hamilton to beat anybody racing him at Silverstone and ultimately in 2021 to a championship. It was sunk cost for me. It wasn't even a question. It's Lewis Hamilton, for crying out loud, 7-time, like, do you know what I mean? I saw him in 2007. I've seen him a gazillion times work magic around Silverstone. You don't beat this dude. And when Max Verstappen triumphed in a straight race, because there's no safety car or, do you know what I mean? Sprint qualifying is as pure races, you're going to get shorter. But in terms of straight out speed, there are no pit stops, no safety car, no nothing. It's mano a mano. It's me versus you. Max Verstappen versus Lewis. And they raced on the first couple of laps, and then Max Verstappen just left Lewis Hamilton in equal machinery. My mind, guys, was absolutely blown. This is something completely different now that we're looking at here. A paradigm shift. Like, I felt like the space-time continuum had been bent. Everything that I thought I knew about F1, I was having to recalibrate, reconfigure it in real time, because you just don't beat Lewis Hamilton around Silverstone. Max had done it. I was like, okay, all right, cool. So this is something different now. And then we get the race proper. So Lewis has realised that he's going to have to do something, right? and again, I'm not going to relitigate for whose fault it was that the Silverstone is. That everybody will have a different perspective of it. But what we do need to realise is that Lewis, for the longest time, I feel like he'd been just jumping out the way of Max. Silverstone, for the first time, he wasn't going to do that. He couldn't afford to do that. The momentum in the championship had swung away from Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen had more than a race win. I'm sure it was like 25 points the gap going into the British Grand Prix that weekend. So Lewis couldn't afford to be passive anymore. Now, of course, he experienced understeer prior to them coming together. So some will say it was Lewis's fault. Some will say Max was too aggressive and didn't leave, bearing in mind the context that he was leading the championship, that he didn't need to be as aggressive in the overtake as he was. Didn't need to overtake Sir Lewis then. Horses for courses. We can relitigate for that another time. But here's what you do need to know. Here's what's fact in this. Lewis Hamilton realised that he needed to get into Cops ahead. Had he not, whoever got into that corner ahead, they were going to go and win the race. And most likely it was going to be bloody Max Verstappen, wasn't it? And that was bonkers to me. We recorded a podcast with my old mate Justin. And when I saw that Silverstone sprint race, I said, you know what about Max Verstappen? This is something very, very different here. Damon Hills echoed my sentiments. You guys are far too kind. Thank you so much. Damon Hills echoed my sentiments, hasn't he? In the Duel documentary. He said, you know what? Max Verstappen can just do things that other drivers cannot do. Tip says, every time you talk about 21 and Bottas, you say he wasn't a good teammate, but nobody talks about the unnecessary penalties he took, so Mercedes could build a... It's a good shout, Tip. It's a good shout. I'm going to get to it, Tip. Let me read out Matthews as well. 2021 was great, but Liberty Media oversold to new fans on what F1 is due to Drive to Survive. Having new fans think every year will go on. It's a good shout, Matthew. It's a good shout. I think that was 2021 and COVID, Drive to Survive were like a holy trinity. And together, collectively, they conspired to betray the essence of F1. F1 was never ever going to be 2021 ad infinitum in perpetuity. That's a rare season, right? 2021, 2012 maybe, 94, 2000. I'm trying to think of it. 16 as well. These ones don't come along very often like this. And I take your point, Matthew. I do take your point. But I say all that to say this. I realised after sprint qualifying 2021 Silverstone that Max Verstappen was something different, because yet again, to reiterate for the avoidance of doubt, I never in my life thought I would see somebody put Lewis Hamilton under manners. That can happen at any circuit, but not at Silverstone. I didn't think I'd ever see it. I also didn't ever think I'd see at Cota. There's a stream somewhere on a hard drive, somewhere in the ether, where we did. I feel like Cota was one of the ones that I streamed. And again, that circumstance, the way that race set up, Cota was one of these ones where, with a view to replicate the strategy that they'd instituted so well, so efficiently, Mercedes tried to do what they'd done in Spain that year. Have the latter stage of the race come to Lewis Hamilton with him on fresher tyres, Max Verstappen on old rubber. Because again, the rules of F1 hitherto in 2021 were that you just don't beat Lewis Hamilton if it's close towards the end, if it's the latter stages of the race, and Lewis Hamilton has fresher rubber, and he's on a charge, and he's in free air, and he has a quick car, equal-ish machinery as near as makes no difference. In those circumstances, you don't beat Lewis Hamilton. I listen, I've never seen it. Up until that point, I've never seen it. And so I didn't expect to see it that day either at Circuit of the Americas. However, again, got to recalibrate your expectations when you're dealing with this Max Verstappen fella. I just didn't know. I didn't know. And this was after Silverstone, by the way. This is after my realisation that this dude was something different. Neo in the Matrix, to race Lewis Hamilton the way that he's racing him each and every single race, to keep with him, to like that the dude was something different. But yet and still, Noddy Cameron F1 didn't expect to see of Max Verstappen a defence worth worth its metal. I thought Lewis Hamilton at Cota was a shoo-in. Streamed it. I was like, all right, then Lewis has got this now. Fresher rubber, 12 laps to go. Let me see those times. The delta comes down between the two of them. It's like, I want to say it's like 8 seconds, 7 seconds, 6, and then it just hovers around at 6. Like, oh my God. Max Verstappen has saved tyres, hasn't he? Like, you can't beat this dude. Like in equal machinery, it's really, really difficult to beat Max Verstappen, as it is Lewis Hamilton. But apparently we're dealing with something a bit different. That this fella, this Dutch fella, had moved the goalposts on as far as Formula One was concerned, because it was just, I'm lost for it. Still, as I watched it back the other day, I was just like, oh my God, Silverstone and Cota were different types of performance from Max Verstappen, because I didn't see them coming. I'll tell you the truth. Just be honest with you. And then even if you're talking Abu Dhabi, I'm going to talk to the race. Jeddah was chaos. And for me, as I watched it back, Jeddah set the scene as far as controversy and polemic. Jeddah set the scene for what was to come in Abu Dhabi. Matthew, you're far too kind, sir. We'll talk about Brazil, I promise. Max's driving Brazil 2016 was a teaser for what would happen when you give him the right car. Absolutely. Max is on course if all goes well. 5, Matthew. I think you're underestimating, mate. I think if he has the car, he might do more than 5. And Lewis Hamilton evangelist will kill me for saying that. But how about, like, he's already on 3? Like, do you know what I mean? Jeez. Right, go on then. 21, 22, 23. So we'll be on 4 this year. Mate, 5 is selling you guys short. Matthews is capable. He's got a lot more than that in his locker, potentially, depending on what the rules and regs say in 2026 or what they do to the cars. So go on then. Let's talk very briefly to the controversy. Not Abu Dhabi, because I don't want to really litigate for that. It's far too techie and toxic. But I was making videos as at Brazil. All right, let's talk about good drives. How about Brazil? Bloody Nora. Then Lewis comes back. This is one. Right, I've missed out a big chunk of it, haven't I? So the momentum throughout the season, it ebbed and flowed. First it was Lewis's, and then it was Max's through to Silverstone, and then Silverstone happens, and then Christian Horner gets on the forefront, talking all sorts of stuff about Lewis's celebration and how he should have been more contrite, more magnanimous, considering the fact that Max was still in the hospital. Precautionary checks, nevertheless. It wasn't like Max was seriously injured. Could Lewis have toned down the celebrator? Again, I don't want to really litigate for that, because that's all very techie. Here's what I will say. Post Silverstone, however, it felt like it was Lewis's, but then Max took over again. And then, as at Brazil, all sorts of chaos. You got the disqualification of Lewis from bloody qualifying because of the 2 millimeters. Or the 0.2 of a millimetre on the rear wing infringement. Take that. Lewis nails it in sprint qualifying, getting down to 8-4 whenever. And then he gets another 5-place grid penalty for the start. So he starts in, I want to say, circa 10th and makes his way through. Makes his way up and then nails Max Verstappen. That, by the way, is a brilliant drive from Max Verstappen. Even all of that stuff notwithstanding. But the gift of Brazil 2021, in my humble opinion, was the genius of Lewis in his setup of Max Verstappen. He knew that the God tier ones around Interlagos realised that the overtaking manoeuvre around serious drivers who were at the level of a Max or a Lewis, the gift isn't in the turn 1 overtake. The gift is to use turn 1 to set up the defender into turn 4. That's the gift, right? That is the gift. And that's exactly what my guy Lewis Hamilton did. Set Max Verstappen up just enough to take him offline, to make him vulnerable into turn 4. Because obviously you want a straight line turn 1 and turn 2. Because after turn 2, you get that bloody long straight preluding turn 4. And that's what Lewis did so brilliantly. It was a fantastic weekend of driving from Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton, and showcased his ability to be resilient. Remember, at these times, the last 4 races, the championship in earnest was on the line. lose another one, and basically you're out the bloody championship. So Lewis, once he got all those penalties, he went back to Cota and said, listen, let's just focus on the constructors. The drivers is gone. He's gone. And then Lewis does it again. It was just brilliant racing, Noir. Thank you so much. Many congrats for the 20,000. Oh, only the beginning. Noir, you're far too kind. And here's hoping, with your guys' support, here's hoping it is only the beginning. But I am conscious and humble and realise that I've got a lot more work to do to fulfill the potential that this channel and brand and the community with your guys' help can be. Oh, Cam, I'm saying he'll win 7 minimum. There you go, Matthew. Mate, he might. Well, you guys are far too kind anyway. Thank you so much, Noir and Matthew. But therein was Brazil. However, the downside impacts from a rule and reg perspective of the way that the stewards, the racing director in Michael Masi, I'm not going to talk about Abu Dhabi because it's far too techie, but the downside impact of the way that they policed and stewarded the Brazilian Grand Prix was only going to trickle down to the remaining Grand Prix, right? So I don't think Abu Dhabi was, of course, very controversial. It'll go down in history as one of the most controversial incidents in all of sporting history, let alone F1. But I think the stage was set for that in Saudi Arabia. And again, I misremembered it, but watching it back via the documentary Duel, it reminded me the misstep. Look, if let me compare and contrast here, because if it's Charlie writing R.I.P. Charlie, if it's Charlie was such a common sense bloke as far as his stewarding and his race directorship. The communication between him and the drivers was always open and honest. And that's kind of what you need, right? That's the baseline, the ground zero, the foundation for good directorship as far as stewarding, surely. So when Saudi Arabia happens, and that's where we start to cross the line, and that's where obviously we're fighting for a championship, and that's where both of the drivers, maybe Max more, probably Max to a greater extent, got messy, right? You have the brake test in inverted commas. Both of them are kind of going off the circuit more regularly. You have to stamp that out if you are Michael Masi at source. You have to be fair and objective and consistent in your institution of the rules and regs, lest you wish for there to be a recurrence at some stage in the very near future. And that's where it got, as far as the brinksmanship from both Red Bull and Mercedes, the driving became over the line from both Lewis and Max. Max, again, probably to a greater extent. But don't hate the player, right? Hate the game. If the stewards are going to allow you to do it, then it's the steward's fault. Michael Masi needed to be harsher, and that needed to be front loaded. Like early on in the season, Saudi Arabia was probably too late. But Saudi Arabia for me is when it became properly fractious, you know. The friction was tangible and the rule breaking was self-evident. Brake testing is bonkers, guys, and you can't brake test. My guy Peter Windsor said, you know what, a brake test, the only punishment that's commensurate is at least a one race ban, because that brake testing thing is so dangerous. Now, again, I'm not going to argue the toss. Many people say Max didn't brake test. It was just a bit of DRS chicken, and that's fair. But nevertheless, man, if that's where we're going with that, then Michael Masi needs to stamp that out at source. But I digress. Overall, then, look, I think we saw a couple of different things. My realization moments took place in Silverstone and Cota. That's where I realized that we were dealing with something that I don't think I've seen before in terms of Verstappen's capability to race a Lewis Hamilton. I just didn't think I didn't think anybody was gonna, and I say all this because I rate Lewis Hamilton so highly. In my time watching F1 over the past 30 plus years, without revealing my age, I've never seen anybody be able to really race, go toe to toe with Lewis Hamilton in equal-ish machinery around the Silverstone. And if that dude has fresher tyres at the end of the race and is on a charge in equalish machinery, forget about it. You're never gonna keep him away. You know, Cam, thank you so much for liking, commenting on my video. Oh, Matthew, drop the NC Power F1, right? Go and have a look at that F1 channel. My guy Matthew just setting purple sectors out here, Matthew. It's admirable. Telling you, I'm kind of jealous that you're just at the beginning of the journey. There is a beauty in that, and you guys have heard me talk before about how I engage with greatness. And listen, when Max Verstappen now that we know how good Max Verstappen is and can be in future, like, it's exciting, but is it as exciting as 2016 when you're seeing this for the first time? Neo in the Matrix. Is he going to make his first jump? He won't need to dodge bullets. He won't have to. You know, that coming up, I've always been overweight that phase of the greatness journey when it's early on and it's like, oh my, can he? Will he? Won't he? Can he challenge a Lewis Hamilton round the Silverstone? Is he that guy to do that? Can he hold off a Lewis at Cota? I just didn't think it was possible. And there was a uncertainty, like a certain suspense when you're seeing any drive. Even Lewis 2007 joining Alonso in a McLaren. Alonso, 2-time champion that had beaten Michael Schumacher 2 times back to back under fortuitous circumstances. At least one of those being the Michelin and versus Bridgestone tyre battle and whatever. And again, we can relitigate for that at a separate time. But the headline reads that Alonso was a 2-time champion and had beaten the dominant Red Baron 2 times in a row. How was Lewis Hamilton, a rookie driver, going to chat? So this is the becoming of greatness, right? And me, the lens through which I watch F1 and ingest my sports, I've always been invested in that. That's just like, that's the level for me. When these guys are coming up, right? See John Jones in the UFC or Michael Jordan in '88, Tiger Woods in the famous US PGA, like the Masters, like, you can't, like, I don't know. See the smile on my face, guys. You can't bottle that. You can't resell it. You can't write those plot lines in books because they won't believe you. Chris was introduced to F1 in 2007. Immediate Lewis fan. Never thought I'd live to see a Max Verstappen mod. That Chris, you've said it more succinctly than me, sir. Like, I just can't. Oh, breathe, Cameron. Me too. I just didn't think I would see these type of things, you know. But I digress. Right, there we go. 2021 overall. Just go and watch Duel. If you've got time, if you've got a chance and can get hold of Duel, it's a 2-parter produced by Sky Sports F1. Craig Slater, shout out to my guy, executive producer. God tier, properly chef's kiss. Honestly, if you can go and take it in, Right, to bookend this session, I want to talk about, there is a Missed Apex podcast. Shout out to my guy Spanners and Joe Saward. And he talks to a couple of things very quickly before I run away. So look, the couple of things were, they talk about the FIA and what's going to happen to Mohammed Ben Sulayem and all this stuff. But, oh, Nawar, you're far too generous. We're into chat territory now, aren't we? I'll go for another 10 minutes and we can go back and forth. We'll read racing craft and talent between Lewis and Max is right up there. Where I'm uncertain is the mental toughness. Max was under pressure for a whole season in 21. And in the end, last 4 races kind of lost it. Go on then, Nawar. Let's talk to this. And thank you so much for the donation. See, we're getting into debate territory now, and I don't hate it. Okay, right. So last 4 races. Evidence that speaks to your point, Nawal, first. So the Jeddah qualifying was Sector 1 and Sector 2 again. Levels of brilliance, eh? But ultimately, he stacked it in Sector 3, turn 22. Cool. So that supports your case, Nawal, that potentially the pressure was getting to Max Verstappen. That's something I forgot about 21, you know. You know, after the Silverstone incident and the rancor and the acrimony that in no small part was kind of fueled and kind of stoked up by Red Bull team principal Christian Horner. There's a moment at the next Grand Prix, which I think was in Monza. Max and Lewis hadn't seen each other after Silverstone, 51G, et al., all this stuff. Christian Horner had talked or whatever is. Lewis had got his flag out and celebrated, and those guys hadn't seen each other. The camera crew had gotten to the next race in advance, and they just wanted to see when the two of them cross paths again, right? And there's a moment when the two of them are walking in the tunnel and they see each other for the first time, and it was massive headlines. The first time that Lewis and Max see each other since the Silverstone incident. And it's so awkward. They acknowledge each other, but their timing's off as they pass each other again. Not quite ships in the night, but you can feel the awkwardness through the screen. Listen, it just makes for nobody. I know there are diehard racers that aren't interested in this, but listen, as a dude that's consumed sports all my life, when I see this sort of stuff and there's acrimony both on and off the track, and it's how are they interacting? What's Lewis? What's the downside on Lewis? Has that impacted him? How's he going to race Max? What's Max saying for the next race? How's he going to Mate, you can't. I cannot. Honestly. Rematch. Noir, I want to see a rematch too. Go on then, Noir. Let me address your other point, because this is a good one. And I do hear it oft quoted that Max bottled it in the last 4 races. So I think there's a couple of things going on. Saudi tick, I'll give that to you, Noir. That absolutely speaks to pressure getting to Max Verstappen. And you know what? Let me preface what I'm about to say with this. How old was Max at the time? So he's 26 now. That was 3 years ago. Max was 23. What? Does that even work? So 2015, when he first came on the scene, he was like 17 years old. Oh, sorry, 2015, 16. He was like 16, 17, right? I'm trying to do the math. So he's 21. Behave. Right, Max is 26 now. 3 years ago, he's 23 years old. Behave yourself. How was he 23 years old going head to head with Lewis Hamilton? All right, look, so in that vein, Noir, I think you can... At 23 years old, would you even expect him to be impervious to pressure? At the highest level, the thing, as he tries to obtain even the thing that he's worked all his life to get. I would expect, I can forgive him a couple of missteps. And there were a couple of missteps, eh? I can forgive him that. Like Jeddah, take that one, Saudi. But yeah, and he was brilliant in Abu Dhabi. I'll tell you that much. In a car that was weaker, he had no right to even get close to Lewis. Okay, even before the Michael Massey stuff. And he was gifted a lot in terms of Checo and the tyres and the pits or whatever. But he was quick in Abu Dhabi. Quicker than what that car should have been. I don't know. And anyway, Noir, I think the salient point is, look, here's what I think the point is now. So if Max was 23 in 2021 and he's 26 now, 3 years worth of growth and maturity. If it was a paradigm shift and the dude was bending the space-time continuum in 2021 at 23, God help the other 19 as at March of 2024. I think that dude is a completely different proposition now. I think he's on a completely different level. And we need to see the rematch, don't we, Noir? We have to see the rematch. It has to. But then the joke is, Noir, check this out. I desperately want to see what Steve A. What Ewok said. Ewok said, can't enjoy races from 2021 just because of what happened at the end. I compare it to me being unable to rewatch Game of Thrones. Yes, you are. I hear you. The whole season is tinged with controversy and it's murky, but I don't know. I watched back, you guys. I don't know if you guys see me post my stream, and I had streamed the Abu Dhabi. I was live streaming at the point. My reaction was just like, I lost my mind and I was swearing and it was chaos, but I don't know, when you watch it as a packet, and this is me doing the gatekeeping thing. I'm not going to proselytize you nor condescend you as to how this is how you should watch F1. But the way I watched that season, the way I watched the documentary, I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Okay, I just lost my mind in it again. I was like, the plot lines and Sochi and Lando and the guys, like that thing where you see them lock eyes for like a split second post Silverstone. It's like, oh, it's just like, you can't even write. I don't know. It was perfect. It was absolutely parallels again to 1989. That Prost and Senna were so similar, but so different in their characters. And these two similar, right? Max and Lewis in terms of like who they are as racers. Listen, a lot of people compare Max to Schumacher in terms of his ruthlessness, but the way he races, I'm reminded of Lewis in 2007. That brave, that kind of like instinctive way of driving and fearlessness. Max in 21 reminded me a lot of like some of the moves that he was pulling, the way that he was driving reminded me a lot of Lewis in 2007. I'll be honest, more than Schumacher. I'll be honest. I've always said it. And so I say all that to say this, that these guys are more similar than I think they even know, on the track. Very, very similar. Like, it's almost like, I think Lewis will see himself in Max. Like, young Lewis Hamilton in Max Verstappen. Even now, I think he will see himself still. Now, is Max taking it on a step? Probably, but that's the way that evolution happens in sports, right? The next generation are meant to be better than the previous one. They're kind of like, Max spends more time in a sim, but again, that's another conversation for another day. I don't know. I'm getting in my bag here. You guys you can see me. I do want the rematch. And the only reason why I say that, I remember my train of thought now. The only reason why I'm talking that way is because I just think, oh, guys, don't even say this. Yeah, hit the like button. Steve A, you're a legend. Muchísimas gracias, Sere. It's Easter, man, and I don't want to taint this live with why did Prost retire, Noah? Let's get the proper questions. Go on then. Why did Prost retire? Thank you so much for the donations. You guys are absolutely. Prost retired because there was a lot of politics involved in that. So Prost retired in 1993 because he had one clause in his contract with Frank Williams. So look, the story of Prost and Senna was in I want to say it was 87, 88. 88 when Ron Dennis, I don't think Ron Dennis was too hot on Senna, but Prost convinced Ron Dennis to sign Senna in 88, I think, because Prost saw something in Senna that Senna was the next one, right? A Lewis or a Verstappen, like that type of thing. And so Prost, being the team player that he was, said, no, listen, this guy's really good. Sign him, not realising the acrimony that was to come, right? So ever since then, of course, 89 happened and that was chaos. 90 similarly, but that was Senna's season. But again, Senna at the end at Suzuka ran Prost off the road. There's a famous interview where one of the engineers was saying that Senna promised that if they didn't switch the grid positions, so Senna qualified on pole and expected pole to be like on the inside of the track at Suzuka. They didn't switch it, did they? Because Balestre, the equivalent to Mohammed Ben Sulayem at the time, was a Prost guy and he was French, etc., etc. So that happened. Prost was one up, and then the next year, 1990, Senna said, all right, then I'm going to have him. And there was a big famous crash. Senna ultimately ended up winning the championship, feeling aggrieved for previous years. He said he's going to make sure if you don't switch the pole across, I'm going for it and I'm going to take him off. Very famous interview where somebody spoke about Senna taking Prost off. And even though, so they crashed on track, obviously, but even when they were in the barrier, Senna's foot was still buried on the throttle. So he was looking to take out Alain Prost. So anyway, during that time, obviously they didn't get on. 92 happened, and that was Mansell's year in Williams, and this was like the big Williams come up, right? Williams period of dominance. not dissimilar to Red Bull, although it was a few years, but they had Adrian Newey and whatever. 93, Prost signed for Williams. Nigel Mansell was retiring and whatever. Prost signed for Williams in 1993, and then in his contract, Prost said, you know what, the only thing, I don't care about the second driver or whatever, like I'll race the second guy. The only thing I ask of you, Frank, because of what happened in 88, 89 and 90 with Senna, acrimony ad infinitum, God tier levels of, the only thing that I ask of you, said Prost, is that you don't sign Ayrton. That's the only thing. But Frank Williams always, in his heart of hearts, he was always in love with Ayrton, right? He always wanted to get Ayrton Senna in the car. So midway through the 93 season, Frank pulled Alain to the side and said, listen, I know you've got something in your contract, but can you do us a solid, mate? The sponsors, the engine manufacturers all want to sign. Renault at the time all want us to sign Ayrton, because at the time he was like the Lewis Hamilton of the sport, right? The dashing good looks, and sponsors loved him, and he was the first one to get like a photographer to follow him around so he could build up his, like he was like the Lewis Hamilton of the era. And Frank Williams wanted him badly in that car for the 1994 season. Alain was like, well, listen, here it is. I've got a clause in my contract that says that you can't, there's one thing that you can't do per my contract. That thing is sign Senna. And if you're going to sign Senna, then I'm out. Se acabó. Ya está. Finished. I am Dunsky. And that's why Prost ultimately sacked it off, to your point, Noir. Because he felt like there was a breach. I don't think there wasn't court proceedings. I don't think Alain was that way inclined. But he was like, listen, if you're gonna sign Ayrton, then I don't need that. So then Prost sacked it off. So it was Mansell in 92 and then Prost in 93. Won fairly easy again because that Williams car was just so dominant. The FW14, I think. And then in 94, Senna came, and it was Senna and Damon. And that was the year, obviously, that Senna passed. But Prost didn't compete in 94. He retired at the end of 93. That was his final year. Look at me with my history. Anybody would think I watched F1, eh? Baker, in all honesty, I expected Max to put Lewis in the wall in one of those last races. In that way, he's better than Senna and Schumacher. It's a good shot. Although, Baker, if I'm going to argue against you there, Brazil. All right. So look, in this, so they talk. This is another good bit that they talk very candidly. And again, bear with me. Dutch fans will say that this is British bias coming out, but I'm not quite. This isn't my words. I'm quoting Brundle et al., who were on the documentary. So look, there's this terminology in 2021 about the professional foul. So the professional foul being, I think it's a terminology that comes from football, so soccer in the UK or soccer in the States, football in England. And it's a foul that you commit where it's a pragmatic foul. Just like, okay, so this guy's ahead in the championship. I just want to whittle down the races, right? So why not DNF the both of us? It makes sense, right? And so around Monza, when most people said that Max was at fault for that incident, the terminology started being bandied out. I feel like it was Damon who used it first at Monza, saying that basically what Max had done there in mounting the sausage curb, and he knew that they were going to have an accident, right? So what Damon said is that time in Monza, he accused Max of a professional foul. Martin Brundle on the Duel documentary, Sky Sports F1 production, said that Brazil, and again, this is a new perspective for me. I'd never considered this before this point, but it's so techie. We're getting into proper techie territory now. So Martin Brundle said, not my words, but Martin Brundle said that he thought, so Monza he thought was a professional foul, and then Brazil turned for, I want to say lap 48, don't quote me, maybe lap 44. You know, the one where Max Verstappen ran Lewis super wide, the super aggressive overcrowding. Martin Brundle on the Duel says again, he leverages that professional foul word. And I never considered it. I just never considered it. I just thought Max was being super aggressive. But watching it back with hindsight, it wouldn't surprise me. We'll never know for sure, right? We can never be so categoric to say yay or nay. We'll never know. Nobody can get into Max's head and know for certain what his plans were, his rationale for doing that move the way he did it. Nobody will know. But watching it back, again, turn 4, the overcrowd, Max, Lewis, you could be forgiven for thinking at that stage that Max was just like, well, let's just, I'm going to take the both of us out. Because again, that wouldn't be, I don't think that's a condemnation of Max. That's F1. That's always been the case. You guys hear me talking about 89, the way that Prost intercepted Senna. There's no way that you're turning there at Suzuka. Prost just said, you know what, like, we come together, it's my championship, so listen, this is the cost of doing business. Unfortunately, Ayrton's similar in 1990. Jerez 97, Michael tried to do something similar. Nico Rosberg in 2014 at Monaco, the way he parked up. Michael Schumacher did a similar thing at Monaco qualifying. 1994 Adelaide, Schumacher and Hill. These guys have always done this, right? It's always been a path on the court. If I'm in front in the championship, then it's almost my privilege, as skullduggerous as it sounds. This sort of thing has always happened in F1. Hence why I felt like Lewis Hamilton had already lost, notwithstanding the fact that they were going into the last Grand Prix of 2022, of 22 in 2021. Level on points. They were level on points, but if they both DNF'd, courtesy of Max's record, I think he'd won more races. Max would have won. And I already felt as a Lewis Hamilton fan that Lewis Hamilton lost that race going, that he needed to have gone into that race ahead. Baku as an example, but we won't really litigate for that because I'm going to start crying. Baku brake magic for me was the ultimate turning point. Notwithstanding Abu Dhabi and the polemic that was. Steve A, I know the best cars attract the best drivers, but it would be nice to have a standout driver who's not in a standout car. Lewis in the Merc and now Max in the RB. It's not exciting in the front. Steve A, you make a good point. Although, Steve A, it's happened in history, right? 2016. If you want an example of that, 2016 Brazil is probably the best example that I can give you. Max's car was still very good, but he wasn't as dominant as the Red Bull is in 2024. You can go back and watch that and know that Max is driving the wheels off that car. Just go back and watch the highlights. Brazil 2016. Just type in Brazil 2016 and go back and watch the highlights of that race, and you'll see a dude pushing. Trying to think of another good example of a guy. Senna in the 90s was another such example. So 91. Oh no, why, you're far too kind. And happy Easter for all of you guys that are out there celebrating. This has turned into a very deep live chat. It's just meant to be riffing about Abu Dhabi for a little while. I'm trying to think of another example, Steve, of early. So Schumacher won 2000 to 2004, but if you go and check out, no, he was quick. 98. Hakkinen won 99 and 98. And Schumacher was still quite quick. I'm trying to think of a 2012 McLaren Lewis. That car wasn't very good, but Lewis still managed to work magic with that sometimes. There were always times, oh my gosh, Alonso in 2012. Alonso in the Ferrari as well, maybe 2016. Don't quote me on that one. But there was a year when Alonso, the year when Alonso was the Alonso death stare. Let me have a look. Alonso. Oh no, that was a Vettel year. 2013 maybe. Alonso death stare. That was it. That was a quintessential year when Alonso pushed that car far beyond. 2012. There you go. That's it. I'm being noddy. My memory's not connecting. So yeah, 2012. Go back and check out Alonso in that Ferrari in 2012. He was a madman. He was just on a completely different level. Like, he was incredible. That Ferrari, listen, and again, we can say whatever you want to say about Alonso. Yeah, he's a line stepper, But Alonso in that Ferrari is probably the quintessential example of a driver outperforming a car. I don't think that car should have gone near a championship, but for a bit of misfortune, he would have nailed it, wouldn't he? Noah says, I know that's why, and what Prost alluded to. Don't you think there is more to it than that? As I understand it, Noel, I think that's it. I think Prost felt. I've heard Prost on a number of interviews say that he felt, not saying explicit terms, but I think he felt betrayed by Frank, because that's the only thing that I asked of you, right? That's all that I asked of you. Just like, do you know what I mean? Just that one thing, do me one solid, just don't sign Senna. That's all I ask of you. Didn't do it. But hey, I digress. Why are you killing me? Thank you so much. You guys are legends, man. Thank you so much for the support. We're at 20,000 now, looking to take this thing to the moon imminently. But again, it's gonna be a lot of hard work. But with your guys' help, it makes the pain go away. Of course, it's I don't care. We'll take us both out. That's Max DNA. That's Joss DNA. You know what, Noah? I can't disagree with you. I cannot disagree with you. But you know what, Noah? Go on, let me try and defend Max Verstappen here. This is gonna make me sound super skullduggerous here. But all right, listen, I give you a couple of my best friends that I started the podcast with. Shout out Guy and Jerry, and Justin, of course. But Guy and Jerry always liked the ruthlessness of a Michael Schumacher. It wasn't personally for me at that time. I can never forgive Michael for 1994 Adelaide, because I was Damon Hill was my guy at the time, at 8 years old or whatever I was back then. Like, he was me. Like, I love Damon Hill. To see how Adelaide went down, I still can't get over that. But I think there is something to be said for, and hear me out here, to your point, Noel, there's something to be said for that guy or girl that's prepared. Girl, look at me with my Essex accent all of a sudden. Been in London too long. That guy or girl that's prepared to go where the next person is not right. That's prepared to kind of go over the line. So, for example, check this out. I was talking to Nasher of Quick Stop about this the other day. I feel like, and Shez and Baxter of the Shakedown, I feel like Max almost has, and Lewis has spoken about this, hasn't he, when he goes up against Max? There's a very famous press conference when asked about whether he gives Max extra room, Lewis just laughed and said, of course, you have to. He was like, I've got to. You'd be a fool not to give Max room because he races too hard. If you don't give Max extra room, you're going to have a crash. And then he spun it a different way and said, Lewis, said that if, like, sometimes you've got to be smart and realise that you're not going to make it into the turn. So you just got to give up the turn. Sometimes you've got to give up the corner, right? And that was Lewis Hamilton early stages of 2021, and still is Lewis to a certain extent. He's a finesse driver, right? And he doesn't want to take contact. He'll avoid it at all costs. But Max is almost so this is where they're different, right? Max is almost the antithesis. He's keen to have it embedded within your psyche that in coming together with him and trying to overtake him, there is a risk. This is Senna's mantra, right? Senna's mantra was this: win it or bin it. And that's why he had so many accidents. Martin Brundle in F3 and bloody... Senna had loads of accidents, right? All the bloody time. And again, at some point, he was a bit of a pariah figure because he was just so aggressive and... Do you know what I mean? You couldn't race him. There was no back and forth. And I think Verstappen, more even than Joss didn't have that when he was racing. Joss was never quick enough. But I think Verstappen, Max, has that Senna DNA. And I think it causes the other 19 on the grid a problem. If they're trying to beat him over the course of a 24 race season, I think it causes the rest a big, big problem. Because scared is probably too strong a word. Wary / apprehensive, though, when it comes to overtaking or defending Max Verstappen, is absolutely where they are. because he's going to do things that they aren't prepared to. And if that's not a weakness, then I don't know what is, you know? I genuinely don't know what is. You got to engage somebody on equal terms. And if that guy or girl is prepared to go somewhere that you won't, then inherently you are disadvantaged now. Even if we want to term that line stepping or rule breaking or skulldug, whatever you want to call it, fundamentally, that's a disadvantage, isn't it? Smash that like, says Steve. Yeah, do me a favour and smash that like. Damon Hill, professional foul. He should explain Silverstone 95 then. Let's go, Matthew. 2012 was Alonso's greatest season in that dud of a Ferrari. Yeah, you know what? I hear you, Matthew. I hear you. There is hypocrisy in all of us, isn't there? I think I hear you, Matthew. I hear you. But I think Damon, I wouldn't absolve Damon from any responsibility, but that doesn't mean necessarily that his criticism or his characterization of some of those incidents, particularly the Saudi Arabia one, I'd say, is a million miles away from the truth, if I can say that in as diplomatic a way as possible. Right, I'm going to run away, guys, and go and be... This is meant to be just a quick, cheeky video, and it's turned into a proper live chat, but I appreciate Hybrid says Max got that dog in him. He got that dog in him. Adash has Senna did pull those poles from his arse. Incredible stuff. The ultimate guy, undisputed. Hell yeah. Senna wasn't a bad peddler. Die hard, pure as they come, and Max Verstappen is crafted in that image, is he not? Super quickly, I'm not sure if I talked about this. I was going to start talking about it, and then you guys started being very generous with your donations. Go and check out the Missed Apex podcast, friend of the channel Spanners, and one journo called Joe Saward. They talk about, it's a big bit of news. It's shame on them that I've made my news video already today, because in this video, Joe speaks of the rumour mill that is Kimi Antonelli potentially. So Kimi Antonelli turns 18. He's got enough super license points already. Remember, the big question around Kimi Antonelli driving for Mercedes in 2025 is one of experience. So hitherto, the line of thinking was that Toto Wolff was going to let F2 pan out, see how he gets on, and then potentially put him in either a Mercedes or a Williams, depending on the extent of his success in his maiden F2 season. Joe on the Missed Apex podcast, going with the latest iteration, latest episode, go and check it out on YouTube. Joe Saward says that plans have changed. Kimi Antonelli has enough super license points now to race in F1. What he doesn't have is the requisite number of years of age. You need to be 18. So remember, Max started racing in Toro Rosso when he was 17 years old. And they said there was a massive... Remember, Toto wanted him, and they wanted him to put him in a junior. They ever wanted him to race in F3 for a while, or put him straight in with... Like, there was a dispute or difference in opinion. Toto didn't want him to come straight into F1. But that was the conditions, right, of Toto Wolff signing Max Verstappen to Mercedes. He wanted to sign him and then bench him for a year, put him through F2, and then have him come into Mercedes the next year, because they didn't have a space, did they? Red Bull said, sack that off. We need that fella now. So we'll sign him, even though he hasn't gone through F2. We'll put him straight in the car now because we just need him. And that's when Max started making all the mistakes, because he was too young, he was too green, and he was too early. It was... I remember at one point thinking that Max was just going to be another Daniel Kvyat, you know, that he was too crash prone. That was a school of thought that many F1 aficionados subscribed to. Remember the crashes in Monaco? Like, he was very crash prone for a while when he was very he was in there too early. Is the truth. He could have done with another year in F2 or a year in F2. That's the truth. But But Kimi, fast forward to Kimi Antonelli. Oh, I say the other thing about Max Verstappen, because Max Verstappen was 17, wasn't he, when he joined? And F1 said that was far too young, and they changed the rules to say that, listen, the youngest that you can be, you need to be 18 and older if you're going to race F1 cars. Max didn't even have a driver's license, did he, by the time he was racing F1, which is bonkers. And again, speaks to that this fella is nearing the matrix, born to an F1 driver dad and a god tier level go-karter for his mum, born to do it, eh? Anyway, Kimi Antonelli, apparently, the shtick on Kimi Antonelli is, or the steer even, Toto wants to run him. I think Toto's got a bee in his bonnet. Scorned is probably the wrong word, but I think he's not too pleased that Lewis has left to go across the Ferrari. So I think in his mind, if he can get the next Max Verstappen, who he thinks is Kimi Antonelli, if he can expedite his learning curve and drop him in the Mercedes as soon as possible, that's perfect for Toto. That's the get back, right? So Kimi Antonelli currently is 17. His birthday is August the 26th, I think. So he turns 18 August of this year. Joe Saward on the Mr. Apex podcast speculates that Toto Wolff's plan, and by the way, as at now, I want to say this week, Kimi Antonelli is in like a W14 or whatever testing. So he's getting his reps in an F1 car, because already they think that he's been good. He's been beating Ollie Behrman, the first star, right, in F2. And Ollie Behrman, you saw how he did the other day. So that bodes well. So here's the plan, says Joe Saward. That Toto, as at Monza is like the end of August. Kimi Antonelli turns 18 August the 25th or 26th. I can't remember which. So as at Monza, Toto Wolff plans to run Kimi Antonelli in a Williams, potentially superseding one Logan Sargent. There it is. You heard it here first. Don't believe me, go and watch the Mr. Apex podcast, the latest iteration of on YouTube. That's what Joe Saward says, and he's normally not a gazillion miles away from the truth. We will see. And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because Logan's underperforming. How long are Williams going to... Do you know what I mean? How long are you going to flog a dead donkey? When do you hit the stop loss on the Logan Sargent trade? You know what I mean? It's been a while now. And then on the back of Australia... and they're undermining his momentum by just taking him out the car that he hadn't crashed to give it to the dude in Alex Albon who had crashed. I mean, it doesn't bode well, does it? It simply doesn't. But I don't know. It's all I don't know, whatever. We'll see, right? Stay tuned for August. It'll be interesting to see how Kimi Antonelli goes. And I suppose you got James Val connect between good mates with Toto Wolff, and Williams is sort of a feeder team to the parent that is Mercedes. Going to be interesting. Anyway, guys, I digress. I've rambled on even for long enough. You guys have been legends. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I will see you at some point tomorrow for the latest edition in news. There will be loads of which Vettel going to Mercedes potentially. Oof. Kimi Antonelli in the Williams as at August. Oof. Gonna get techie. You guys have been legends. Thank you so much for watching. Happy Easter to those of you who are celebrating. Have a fantastic rest of the weekend. And I will see you same place, same time tomorrow at some point with an edited video between now and then. Remember to look but never stare.